All right, people, it is Sunday, July 31st. We're officially a month into kind of like, I guess, like the whole kind of weird post-pandemic period. I don't know if you really want to call it that. It's been such a weird last 7 months for media just in general, but I'm back. Chris and I are actually back to break down. We have a little bit of an off week movie-wise, so we're going to break down just some of the shows that we like watching as opposed to some of the shows that everyone else was talking about. We were kind of coming off a gluttony of a lot of shows that a lot of people were really excited about, really into. And now we're kind of into that phase where it's like, yeah, this is the one for us. We're going to talk about some of the shows that we like talking about. So, Chris, you got anything to say before we get started?
It's been a while since we've done one of these kind of episodes, but they're always my personal favorites, and I hope you guys feel the same way. We got a lot to talk about today, so let's get into it.
Absolutely. All this and more on today's episode of the Talking TV podcast. All right, what's up, Chris? It's good to have you back, man. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks, but it's felt like longer. So
It always feels like longer whenever you're not on the show. Remember, we're still coming off of like 3 years where we're like doing this like every week. So
well, we're in that post-pandemic period, as you say.
yeah, it's really weird. So obviously we have we have the Apple TV Plus roundup that we're talking about as well. Like I said, a couple of our favorite shows that came back that aren't quite as on the radar as like a Barry or a Better Call Saul. We're going to be talking about the third and second season of For All Mankind and Physical, which are two shows that premiered in the last couple of years that we absolutely fell in love with during the pandemic and were a big reason for us getting through the pandemic. But before we got this started, I just wanted to like kind of get your viewpoint on, I guess, like, so we went through so many changes media wise throughout the pandemic space, right? And I wanted to get your thoughts on kind of like where we are right now, where it feels like theaters are still in such a weird spot as far as whether or not like people say, oh, theaters are dead. Oh, they're not dead. Oh, they're dead. Oh, they're not dead. You know, we're still having that discussion, even though it feels like kind of tired out. It feels like streaming has just been slaughtering this year. Just like the amount of shows that have come out this year that I'm just like, whoa. Okay, like we thought streaming was maybe like starting to lull a little bit. No, they were just getting started. But now, like I said, we're in kind of a break period for right now. So I just wanted to get your take on that because we haven't been talking about it as much. I feel like just in general, just because of how busy we've been and everything we've had going on.
Totally, yeah, no. I definitely think it's an interesting question to sort of check back in on from time to time, because while we are, I think, like as a society recovering and getting back to normal, I also think that there is a few different sort of like subgroups of people that have formed. There are the people that have just been itching to get back out there and return to in-person interaction, which you're certainly seeing a lot more of. But then there's also the people who like have gotten so comfortable and used to, first of all, not a $17 bag of popcorn, to not sitting in a theater with other people who are going to cough and talk and make noise, when they can just put on their surround sound system that they got at a huge discount on Prime Day. Shout out to Twitch, what we're streaming on right now, an Amazon company, right? Maybe that'll boost us in the algorithm for once. But anyways, they're just so used to sitting at home, relaxing in their pajamas, not having to worry about going anywhere to watch top quality content. And I think a lot of that is obviously the effects of the pandemic sort of dividing us even further than we already were. We don't need to get into any more specifics there. Use your imagination. You know what I'm talking about. But I think also it's the effects of streamers sort of capitalizing on the pandemic and really. First of all, we had so many new streamers pop up in the era of the pandemic, Peacock, Paramount Plus, to name a few. Not saying those streamers are amazing or top tier at all. Of course, it's a matter of opinion. In my opinion, they aren't. But they did take away some stuff from other streamers, like the Halo bid went to Paramount Plus. They got that show. The Office and Parks and Recreation went to Peacock, taking them away from Netflix. So it's made it easier for you to sit at home, because that variety, I think, in the old days that you would get from a theater when it wasn't just superhero movies and the occasional animation, in the form of Pixar or something, the variety is now on the small screen. It's, hey, if you can afford $5 here, $10 here, maybe for like an HBO, $15 here for a subscription, guess what? You're still saving more money than you are going to the theater. You can watch it again. You don't have to sneak into a later showing if you wanted to see it again, or if you have it like that, buy another ticket. So I think it's the unfortunate repercussion of what have we said all the time? Like, this podcast got us through the pandemic. I think streaming shows and binge watching shows that people hadn't had time to catch up on, that we did the same thing as them, Dom. We just talked about it publicly, you know?
Right.
Um, I think the difference is, though, that we are, it seems, both back to going out in person. But I know a lot of people who aren't, young people like us, not just older folks. What is your take on all that, man?
Well, it's super weird because a lot of things that I've been hearing on podcasts that I listen to in the post-pandemic phase has been people want to get out. You know, they've been stuck inside their houses for a year and a half, some 2 years on end, depending on everyone's different individual states, and they want to get out and they want to go outside and they don't want to be streaming. So it's created this weird paradox and paradigm where streaming in 2022 is still, for the most part, as successful as it was in 2021. But it's being combated by the fact that a lot of people do not want to be stuck inside their houses. So you have this really weird mix of, okay, you had this brief period of time where it felt like, okay, a certain number of shows were doing really well. But then on the other hand, you still have the bunch of people who are complaining, oh, there's too much content to watch. You know, we don't know what it is that we want to watch. There's too much of a gluttony of content. On top of the fact that theaters, which you thought would have been booming this year, you know, after the announcement last year, obviously, that HBO would not be releasing any more titles direct to HBO Max as well as in theaters, because they realized that that was robbing them of more money, even though I thought that was an important and necessary decision at the time that they announced it. But you still have theaters in like a weird spot because people want to go out, but when they want to go out, it's like, yeah, well, you don't want to go out and sit in a dark theater. They're like, we already remember how miserable theater experiences were before the pandemic. So now it's, what are people doing? They're going to concerts. They're going to big live events. Have made the biggest comeback I think I've ever seen of any comeback. I mean, you can speak to that more than I can, but I mean, these ticket prices for some of these live events are the most outrageous and expensive that they've ever been. And they know that they can charge that much because people will just pay whatever they can, on top of the fact that we're in a recession. So everything is just more expensive in general. I mean, that's not speaking on anything political minded. Like, we are in a recession. Everything is more expensive right now. On top of the fact that there's also a lot of factors that are going into streaming as well that I feel like just the common man isn't talking about. You know, obviously everyone was super worried because they're like, oh, Netflix stock plummeted. Oh, everyone's worrying. They're like, oh, is this going to be the end of the original one that, you know, the one that originated it? Or is Wall Street going to finally pull out? Is Netflix finally going to cave to the massive amounts of debt that they've been taking on every year? And the end all be all result is the fact that Netflix did lose 902 I think K subscribers, which from what I heard is actually a lot less than what was originally intended. And apparently it seems that once again there is just even more disparities than we originally realized, where it's like, okay, everyone thinks that Netflix is going down the tubes, but just because for us, you know, the common average viewer, obviously, yeah, the fact that they raised their prices to $20.99 a month, which is ridiculous. I think they're the most expensive streaming service, to the fact that they have little to no good content anymore, because as 50/50s, I'll say their original content was. A majority of the stuff that people watched on there was the comfort food, the repeat watching, which almost all of which is no longer available on there. The Office is no longer available to watch on there. 30 Rock is no longer available to watch on there. I even saw a thing a couple of weeks ago saying that in 2025 they were taking Breaking Bad off of Netflix, which I'm like, wow, that was one of the shows that like made the streaming service originally. On top of the fact that this is the first year that Netflix, if we're just talking about them exclusively amongst the original streamers, is going to be adding both an ad tier, which they said that they would never do. They said that they would never, ever do. They're like, we're never cracking into ads. But they said 2022, they're like, screw it. We need money. So in order to start to cover some of this debt, and in order to start to compete with some of these streamers, so we're adding an ad tier. And on top of that, they are supposedly cracking down on password sharing. Will they actually do that? We'll see. But yeah, so that's kind of recapping all the weird things that have happened in the world of streaming right now. You know, again, just taking out the quality, because again, I feel like when it comes to quality of each individual streaming service, we kind of have a known thing of what we're going to watch, you know, like Netflix, we kind of know what to expect. But the problem with Netflix is that they always have the one thing that ends up taking over the whole world just based off of, you know, their algorithm. You know, it was Stranger Things this year, and then it was Squid Game last year. You know, HBO and Apple, we pretty much have come to expect a consistent amount of quality. Hulu is, again, it still feels like, despite the fact that Hulu dominated the Emmys Like, you want to talk about the Emmy nomination real quick. Hulu just ran the gamut. I think they finally beat out Netflix as far as amount of nominations that they had, because I feel like with overall amount of shows, I feel like HBO and Apple, it was still, they ran the gamut as far as most nominations per show, but they only had a few shows that were nominated. I think Apple only ended up having like 3 shows that ended up really being nominated a lot. And what's it called? So, but it still feels like Hulu is in that weird phase of trying to play catch up. And then you have Amazon, which is like, yeah, we just don't care. We just don't care because we already have all this money. You know, we're dropping The Boys, we're dropping all these massively expensive fantasy shows that don't look good at all, but we put all this money into this thing, so we gotta get back out now. Like, it's kind of insane. I'm like how the Lord of the Rings show looks visually better than most of the CG movies we're getting in theaters. But I already know, I'm like, this is going to be another one of those things that is just so boring. So I don't know. I kind of dropped a lot there. So I wanted to know what's your take on all that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Netflix is interesting in comparison with the headline of this episode, the Apple TV Plus of it all, because you have multiple different approaches. Obviously, this isn't rocket science. Just use your eyes and you'll be able to see that there are different approaches, right? Like you just said, Amazon is the, hey, we can fund it, so we're going to do it. However much it costs, we will make that show happen.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be good. We're just going to do it because we can. And time will tell. You know, there's a lot coming down the pipe for Amazon. Really, all we've seen the fruits of the labor of are The Boys and like a few other select, like The Expanse was revived and things like that. So we'll see. We'll see what they're able to do with their massive amount of money.
Yeah.
But that is one approach. You have the Apple TV Plus approach, the HBO sort of cornerstone at this point in regards to them, which is quality over quantity. And what fascinates me about HBO, and this might be a whole nother podcast in and of itself, which it's the way that they've managed to take that quality and well, make it meet the quantity, because they're always putting something out, and for the most part, even if it's not my cup of tea, not a style I gravitate to, I enjoy it. I see the merit behind the filmmaking. And then you have Netflix. And Netflix, at one point, as we both know, Dom, were the titans of the industry. They were the robber barons of the early streaming era. No one could touch them. No one could stop them. They played God because they were.
It helps when you were the only market in town.
Exactly. Oh, yes, of course, Luke. Disney Plus. Of course, Disney Plus. I mean, Disney Plus is interesting because, again, really what they've started to do is just co-opt their movie franchises and give you sort of like bite-sized doses of each of the big IPs each quarter of the year. We see them rolling out now a new Star Wars show every quarter, finally catching up with their already onslaught of Marvel miniseries. And of course, the other little random things that come in between, like Jeff Goldblum running around Earth or whatever the hell they want to call it.
They put like an I Am Groot mini series of shorts. Like they brought back the shorts out of nowhere. You know, it's all still tied to their franchises, but
yeah, exactly. But thank you, Luke. I appreciate that. That keeps us honest and keeps our brains from remembering everything we need to cover here. But my favorite thing is the Netflix thing, right? I think they spent something like $425 million to acquire the rights to Knives Out for only 2 movies. Those are expensive movies.
Yeah.
And then this is the best. This comes from LA Times. The terms of transaction were not disclosed. We're talking about Seinfeld being acquired by Netflix, but Netflix paid more than 500 million, paid more than the 500 million NBC Universal paid for The Office, and the 425 million Warner Media shelled out for Friends. People familiar with this deal said both of those 5-year deals were streaming rights in the US. And let me tell you, this article came out September 16th, 2019, and LA Times does a amended if they make a gaffe or they do an updated on their website to make sure that they're honestly reporting, and they have not done that. So it seems that the 425 million that Warner Media paid for Friends on HBO, Netflix paid more than that for Seinfeld. And the real kicker, Dom, is Seinfeld comes off Netflix in 2 years. And here's the real kicker, Dom. What came out? Yeah, what came out the same weekend that Seinfeld hit Netflix?
I couldn't tell you because I don't remember, gun to my head, when Seinfeld actually premiered on Netflix.
You know why you don't remember?
Why?
Squid Games.
Stop! That's just the same weekend? That's
same
crazy.
weekend. And that is what happened. So Netflix, I mean, They couldn't have
Oh man.
predicted it, and I'm sure long run that they own Squid Game forever is going to be more beneficial now that we have some spin-offs coming out and in another season in and of itself. But I mean, dude, the they're just they
It
the
continues to
amount of
mystify
debt
us.
they have.
We talked about it 2 years ago, and we're still wondering how. How are they able to do this?
I don't know. The money well has not run dry at Netflix yet. I don't know. You brought up pre-show talking about the stock prices and all
Yeah.
of that. So John Campia had a video on his channel a few weeks ago now, and he basically had done his research. And I just tried to do these articles up, so I pulled this article up and I couldn't find it. So this shows he's a pro. But if you guys want to go and find my source, just go and look at the past 3 weeks. John Campia has really been heavily covering Netflix. And in his thing, I believe he said that there was only 2 or 3 of the top most watched shows on Netflix right now that were actually Netflix originals. Of course, Stranger Things and Squid Game were in there just
Right.
because of the recent explosion. But it's really like Seinfeld. It's New Girl, which comes off the platform next month. A bunch of stuff that the interesting and alarming thing was they're losing soon. And what I also find interesting is how did he find that article? Because if you type in on Google, and I know we're doing this live, so it's hard to multitask, but I typed in top most watched shows on Netflix 2022. It only wants to give you lists of their original series or like roundups of each week's top 10.
Yep.
Because they don't want you to know. Because if
Right.
you're a shareholder, they don't want you to know that. Yeah, we have had some wins lately. Stranger Things, Squid Games, like the only 2 wins really. Ozark came and went.
Literally.
I mean,
Ozark
you
came
covered
and
it.
went. Came and
When I
went.
was in
It
my
was
finals, you guys covered it, but you're the only people I saw aside from like the people
baffling.
who
Which
get paid
right.
to do this. And it's like they need a
And
win, and they're not
Ozark is a multi-Emmy nominated and winning show for them. So you would think.
right. Exactly, and I think there's so many problems. Personally, I think this doesn't come from anywhere, and this is where I want your opinion after this,
Mhm.
Dom. And I have so many other things I want your opinion on in this episode. I miss these kind of episodes, but
Yeah, we haven't had these in a while.
they're fun. Yeah. But I will say, I think they need to run more advertisements. I never see Netflix advert. The only time I saw Netflix advertisements on TV was during around football when Seinfeld came on. They would do like a quick scene from Seinfeld that was hilarious, and then Netflix logo would pop out, kind of like only on Netflix type of thing. But that was like 2 week span, and then it vanished. I've seen YouTube pre-roll ads for Stranger Things. That's about it. I mean, it's just they spend all this money to create shows, original content, and then they don't market it properly, and I feel
Right.
like they wonder where it goes. I'll tell you this much, I might not enjoy every Star Wars or Marvel Disney Plus show, but I've seen advertisements. I've seen people post billboards on Twitter. I've seen, it pop up on my, recommended stories that are the advertised stories on social media and whatnot. And I just never really feel that with the former king of the industry, Netflix. But take it away, Dom. What's your take on any of this?
Well, I mean, the most annoying and confusing, but also again, it's the thing that has always set them apart is how Netflix kind of took the YouTube model and ran with it, where YouTube doesn't advertise it, but somehow everybody knows about it. It's kind of the wonder of the algorithmic advertising model, for lack of a better word. Again, it's like Netflix they don't advertise anything. It's one of the reasons why nobody watches or knows about their movies, and they made a pretty decent amount of great original movies. But again, it's if you look at all their original stuff that does like really, really well, it's all stuff that it's like, yeah, it's super trending on Twitter. That seems to be like the Netflix model for success, is whether it's trending on Twitter. Again, Stranger Things, Squid Game, Cobra Kai when that was out, The Witcher for all of its 5 minutes that it was trending, And so it's consistently baffling to me as far as how they're able to do well, because you're right, all of the other streaming services do advertisements and run advertisements of some sort. Now, again, to your point before about them needing to run advertisements, obviously, again, they said they would be incorporating an ad tier by the end of the year. So will that make a difference as far as their actual advertising goes? I don't know. It also was so weird because I feel like every single time I listen to podcasts of people about Netflix, I feel like they're having a completely different conversation. I feel like they're the most just out of the loop as far as what people want. Because every time I talk with people I know about Netflix, they're like, oh, Netflix doesn't really have anything to watch. I don't really care. Because again, it's like, I feel like once again, it's another one of those things where the viewing habits of the consumers are just something that is just completely not on the radar of the studio executives and the type of content that they're making, and that's kind of mystifying to me, because it's like, this is the age of social media. This should be the easiest time to figure out what people's viewing habits are. You have all this data, all this analytics. So why does it feel like your entire approach is just seemingly going against that? That's the thing that's the most confusing to me, and that's the thing that consistently stands out to me. But hey,
Yeah, Dom, you just opened my eyes up because how could I not have remembered about The Witcher and Cobra Kai?
I know, right?
I think it's, but I
What are
think
your
it's
favorite shows?
because,
Two of your favorite shows?
yeah, as much as I love those shows, I think it's because, well, I don't know if there's a real staying power with Netflix. And I don't think that's an indictment on the quality of those two shows. They are what they are, and I think they're excellent at being what they are. The problem is, I just think Netflix doesn't do a good job keeping their content in the
No,
zeitgeist. And
definitely
it's
not.
weird because I remember Netflix was killing the meme game when Bird Box came out. That was like their one moment where they really tapped into the pop culture and did the branding right. But where did that go? If ever they need something like that, it's now.
Right. They have absolutely no staying power. Stranger Things, the best decision they made was splitting that up across a month status, because so that way they were able to keep that momentum in a really natural way. And like we always talk about it, it's like, yeah, you'll get those certain shows and they can continue for like like after they drop all at once, they can continue kind of in the zeitgeist. But I feel like their problem has always been their focus on quantity over quality. Their fact of it's okay, it doesn't necessarily matter if we have a show that sticks in the zeitgeist because we're just going to keep pumping out something new for people to watch every week. We're just combating sleep as long as our viewing numbers are up, and it doesn't matter. And we won't need to run ads. They essentially tried to play the YouTube game, but with actual content. And what they've seen, especially with the last couple of streaming services that have come out, is, oh, wow, so you have these streaming services that are putting out maybe one show at a time, but they're getting all the eyeballs, and it's causing people to want to keep their subscriptions and maybe watch some of the other stuff that they're putting out. Maybe that'll work better for us. So I feel like they're trying to adopt that model with adding the ads and everything, but they're still trying to like have it both ways and try and mix it with their old school model, just pushing out content nonstop. And I feel that's creating a really big rift in this kind of, the consumer game. Now, real quick, before we kind of finish up the section on Netflix, I wanted to bring it back to Apple real quick in order to kind of like transition us into our Apple TV Plus section,
Well,
which is,
then real quick, I just want to just a few last points about
yeah,
Netflix that some of our viewers, I think might find interesting. So I'm looking at the stock data. It was already at a low at $348 Tuesday, April 19th. Today it sits at 224. So that's like
ooh,
over $120 drop. And the height, the height year to date was $597 a year ago today. And so we've come down almost by half. And then this article from NBC, NBC News, Netflix reports loss of 1 million subscribers in the last quarter. Apparently, that's better than what they initially predicted. The streaming platform said earlier this year it would lose 2 million subscribers in the second quarter that ended in June. So, my question to you is, you're right. They haven't changed their habits.
they
They're
haven't.
still throwing money at the wall.
Yep.
So, do you think this ad tier is the answer? I mean, do you think there's a fix on the horizon? Do you think they should celebrate not losing 1 million subscribers? Like,
I don't
or
necessarily.
only 1 million? What's your take?
It's so weird because I don't necessarily know if there's a fix, quote unquote, because in our mind, again, it feels like all we've talked about for the last 2 to 3 years now is how Netflix keeps losing money. And again, this was supposedly the biggest crisis that they've faced since kind of the onslaught of the streaming wars. And they're seemingly bouncing back better than ever, where they lost, what was that, like 250,000 subscribers? And they're saying that's a good thing because, hey, it's not as many as we thought we were going to lose. So I'm really mystified as far as that goes. I feel like at this point, the only thing that would surprise me at this point about Netflix is them actually like shuttering their doors and selling off their assets to like some other streaming service. I feel like that would be the biggest thing where it's like, whoa, now I'm actually surprised. But just based off everything that we've seen so far, it's like every single time people are saying, oh no, is it over for Netflix? I'm just like, they'll find a way to bounce back because they always do somehow.
Okay, so you're not deterred by any of this, and
Not
are you
really.
still going to subscribe?
I wish I could say I was, but like again, we talked for 5+ years about how they were accruing so much debt per year. And if this doesn't mean the end of them, then I don't know what will, because they're still seemingly at the forefront of pop culture.
So you're not canceling your subscription anytime soon.
I mean, it's not mine. I'm not the one paying for it, so I have nothing to cancel. Now,
And that's
granted, we'll see.
exactly what
Now, granted,
what
we'll
they
see
didn't want to
again.
hear.
We'll see if the password sharing thing, because that's another thing to try to crack down on as well. But we'll see if the password sharing doesn't cause them to lose too much subscribers. They seem to think that cracking down on password sharing is going to gain them subscribers. I personally think that. I personally think again, this is why I wish it could just go up against all of Wall Street and their thought mentalities. But again, I think that's going to lose them even more subscribers than they realize, because I don't think again, it's the thing that we always talk about with viewing numbers, is they never account for how many people are actually watching. They account for how many screens are being watched, and those are two completely different numbers. So they really have never taken that into account. That goes all the way back to the age of Nielsen ratings, right? But Nielsen ratings couldn't really do anything about it. Now Netflix is trying to control that even more, and I personally think it's going to lose them even more subscribers. But hey, that's just me. So we'll see if that actually happens, by like Q4 of this year or whenever it is that they're initially set to put in this password sharing thing, supposedly.
Well said, man. Dom, we tried doing some password sharing on a certain
We
streaming
did,
service, and that was
it did not
difficult.
work, because I'll say this, man, Apple TV, they clamped down super tight on that. But before we actually get to the shows, I wanted to bring up something really interesting. So we were talking about before, kind of when we were going through all of the different streamers, about how Apple always seems to be focused on quality over quantity, and that is true to a certain extent. But it's been so weird, because it feels like, with the exception of like the few really big ones that really popped out, the morning show when that first premiered, and then kind of the real big nosedive that it took this past year, Ted Lasso obviously being the phenomenon that it was. Severance started to have its little bit of a moment earlier this year, and it getting all the Emmy nominations. I don't know if you saw how many Emmy nominations it got. It got a lot, and I was super, super happy with everything that it got. But there's something that's coming on the horizon that I don't think a lot of people really take into account. It's interesting that you say that Apple focuses on quality control, because what's so interesting about Apple streaming service is that Apple streaming service essentially functions the same way as Amazon. They have all this money that they funnel into it. They don't really need it, because again, unlike Netflix, they're able to pay for a single day of content for a subscription that would based off just one day. Sorry, let me rephrase that. They're able to pay an entire year of content based off of just all the AirPod sales that go on in one day at their company, So they don't really have a need for the service, but it feels like, unlike Amazon, which is like, okay, we'll just drop a random show once every quarter and it'll be like the most watched and most talked about show, I feel like, with the exception of Wheel of Time. But again, they've got the Lord of the Rings show coming out, but Apple has not really done that. They've actually really curated their service like a real service, and that's what's been so fascinating and interesting about covering them the last couple of years. Is with a few exceptions, all their shows have been mostly really great. They've been really unique. They've been really interesting to watch. We haven't really had a bad thing to say about anything that they put out. I watched a couple of the original movies that they put out. They haven't been great, but again, they're curating their stuff. They're starting to build up. So that's what's kind of always been so fascinating to me. Is it's like, wow, this is, and kind of why I've always championed Apple, is I'm like, wow, you have a company that does not need to put at all the amount of thought and kind of time into the quality and content selection. Outside of Ted Lasso, I don't actually know anybody that's really talking about or really watching any of these shows, but that doesn't matter, because they actually, unlike Netflix, have all this money. And also, there's something coming on the horizon for Apple that I don't think that a lot of people are realizing. So I want to clue the Talking TV audience into that as well, kind of give them a leg up as far as what to expect from Apple in the future. So there's a movie coming out next weekend called Luck. It's called Sky. It's from Skydance Animation. It looks like a pretty standard, kiddie animated fare. There's an enchanted other world full of magical creatures, and this one, random girl ends up wandering into it, and havoc ensues because she's apparently super unlucky. What people don't realize is the name behind this movie. It sounds like a pretty standard kids movie. It's from Skydance Animation, which is an animation company that has been kind of on the up and up for the last couple of years. So the producer behind this movie is John Lasseter. John Lasseter, for people who don't realize who that is, was formerly the head of Pixar, who was let go for them for sexual misconduct a couple years ago. Apparently, it seems that was not nearly as bad as they made it out to be, because Lasseter has said that he was going to be working on other fields of the animation company. And from what I've heard of the behind the scenes, is that this movie Luck that's coming out, as well as a lot of the other, Lasseter is essentially attempting to rebuild Pixar with the Apple TV Plus brand. After Pixar, I think it's safe to say, it's kind of gone down to the dumps of Disney Plus. I know a lot of Pixar employees are still really furious with some of the decision making that's gone on behind the scenes at Disney. And I think it's super ironic, the fact that Lasseter is kind of attempting to restart the Pixar brand, not the Pixar brand, but the type of quality that is known with the Pixar brand. when Apple and Steve Jobs were originally one of the founding members of Pixar way back in the day. So I think that's a really interesting, like, kind of come full circle moment right there. But I think that Apple's going to be like a big one to keep track of, as far as it's like, okay, now rather than having like the occasional one-off, like they're really going to have like a really interesting and diverse kind of curated brand that will be able to appeal to all different sorts of markets in a way that I feel like a lot of these other streaming services are having a little bit of a tough time with. So I don't know, what's really your take on that, Chris?
Well, I guess like the least important part of it all, but the part that kind of just makes me feel just like warm inside as a human is how well Apple has handled the streaming service because of Steve Jobs' love for film and being a creator, a creative person. I think that's pretty cool. I'm looking at this trailer right now for Luck, and this looks
It
amazing.
looks
I mean, it
good.
looks
It looks
so
really
good.
good. It looks, dude, it
Yeah,
looks better
yeah.
than like, it sucks because this year has been kind of weak for animation. It really has been. And like between, and just the Pixar movies that we got this year between Lightyear and Turning Red and Luck, I'm like, wow, like I remember watching that trailer, I'm like, this looks great.
You just mentioned Turning Red, and I just got a little triggered again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just say,
What a disgusting movie.
who knew they could have put out a movie worse than that this year, Pixar, and somehow they topped it with Lightyear, which I heard is a movie that was so bad that I'm like, wait, you mean to tell me that you have a Toy Story IP movie here, and somehow people are saying it's worse than some of the Cars movies? You know you got a stinker on your hands then.
Have you seen it yet, Lightyear?
No, I did not watch it. I ended up skipping it, but just based off the reviews and from what everyone's told me, I did not make the wrong decision.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So you ask me what do I think about all this? I think first of all, I love competition. I think competition makes things spicy. It challenges people and forces them to do better. I think Netflix is kind of caving because of a lack of competition for so long. I think they got a little comfortable. It's like as much as I don't necessarily watch basketball, I know LeBron James, now in his 40s, is still at the top because he has not let himself become stale. He's continued to put the work in, continue to reinvent himself in the game of basketball to stay on the top. And that's what you have to do when you're the king, right? I mean, that's if I called Netflix the dethroned king earlier, I think it's only right to bring in a sports analogy with the actual king of basketball, as they call him, King James. And it just, anyone does this. Anyone at the top of their game, if they want to stay at the top of their game, they will find ways to maintain that for as long as they can. And I think this just goes to show Netflix has not been doing a good job maintaining that throne. I think they got too comfy. And it happens, but I'm glad it happened because Apple TV Plus has been a gift. First of all, I got the first year free just from buying an Apple product. So that was amazing because they hooked me. Within that first year alone, as you said, we got the morning show season 1, which was brilliant. And I still think is an amazing piece of TV. It's a shame where that show's gone, but it's really one of their only blunders. And it's just the wokeism that kind of tanked it. But you have Ted Lasso, which is phenomenal. You have Severance, which is amazing. The show that I'm dying for the day you have a rainy day to watch See with Jason Momoa and now
Right,
Dave
and that
Bautista.
third and final season is coming out soon too.
And I would love for you to catch up because I think that'd be a really fun one to talk about here on the channel. So hopefully we can make that happen. Because Dom, I think you're just as someone who's really just understands film in the way you do. The performances are just brilliant. I mean, it's awesome. And I think Apple, their budget. I think you're right. Them being able to sell so many AirPods in one day, they can fund like 38,000 shows in a year. I think the shows like See wouldn't exist if it wasn't for companies like Apple expanding and becoming more, multi-conglomerate type of things because that show is a hard sell. But let me tell you, it was done the right way and it was phenomenal. And we can even dive further. For All Mankind, Physical, 2 other amazing shows. I mean,
Yeah.
you're right; their movies aren't always the greatest, but I mean, we've watched a few, and they weren't terrible by any means. I
Yeah,
mean, they were.
I've liked the Apple TV Plus movies a lot more than I feel like a lot of other people. I feel like it's just, again, it's a matter of traction. I feel like they have yet to have like a really, really big hit that a lot of people watch, a lot of people like, and everyone's talking about. Like they had the Best Picture winner of last year, Coda, which I think was kind of mystified everyone because that kind of became the little engine that could. And I know that was a big Sundance hit when that premiered last year, but like I don't know how many people have seen it. You know, I like the Tragedy of Macbeth. I feel like I also like Cherry a lot more than everybody else did, but I feel like they kind of got off to a little bit of a rough foot because I feel like Cherry was like their first like big mainstay kind of, movie that they watch. So I think they have time. I think when the Scorsese movie finally comes out, Killers of the Flower Moon, I feel like that'll be the big one, because remember what The Irishman did for Netflix back in fall of 2019 between that and Marriage Story. So we'll see. Also, Scorsese seems to have parked his butt there, saying it's like, okay, Apple TV, that's going to be like the future of cinema now, because him and DiCaprio just booked their next movie, The Wager, for Apple TV Plus as well. They're going to start filming that once Killers of the Flower Moon finally premieres. I'm so sad because that one got pushed to next year. So I'm like, great. So now we're going to have to wait another year for Scorsese. I just become used to it at this point with Scorsese, where it's like, okay, every time I think we're going to get a movie one year, I'm like, okay, expect it to get delayed another year, because that's exactly what happened with his last 3 movies. So,
But you know what? Even if it's not the greatest film, at least it's pushed for the filmmaking to be given all the love and
exactly.
attention it needs.
Exactly.
Not like those Marvel VFX artists who are just apparently
man,
beaten into the ground. But that's a different podcast too.
Into the ground. Oh my God, dude! How happy did it? Okay, real quick, not talking. How happy did it? How happy did those posts make you when you're like, yes, finally, Marvel being exposed as the villains that they truly are, strong arming the industry?
Well, I think it's not right. I think they preach all of these morals that they don't hold as a corporation,
Oh yeah.
and so I think it seems pretty grueling to ask a VFX artist to crunch time weekends, hours after traditional offices close, to get 6 different types of an image, and then we're gonna go with one of this 6 different types of the way this fire coming out of the hand might look. And guess what? When we pick that one, you're going to have to then make it look 10 times better on this limited schedule. It really is messed
up.
It
gets even better. It gets even better. Sometimes we'll even ask them to do that like a week before the movie's set to come out.
Dude, I didn't even know that. That's great. You got to link me an article that gets into that. I'd love to read it.
Ridiculous, some of the stuff. And then what's even worse is, okay, if you can't meet these ridiculous demands, we're gonna blacklist you and basically make sure that not only that you can never get another Marvel project again, which are like basically keeping some of these VFX companies alive. Like, it's so messed up.
Absolutely terrible. And I'm glad you brought up the blacklisting thing. That brings us back to this Apple TV Plus, this Sky movie that's coming out. I mean, Thank God for Apple TV Plus. Now we have competition. We have another top tier company that can fund the likes of what it takes to produce and create a Pixar animation team, and give us another player in the space. So maybe we don't have to suffer another film like a Red or a Lightyear, which I won't suffer Lightyear. I think
honestly, if I could trade up animation, I've been with Pixar. I've been the biggest Pixar defender for the longest time. But if I'm not gonna lie, just based off of we had a brief respite period with Soul and then Luca last year, which I think were both really good. But yeah, between Turning Red and Lightyear this year, the Disney original movies, I'll still give a chance, because those for the most part have been pretty good. I really liked Raya and the Last Dragon and Encanto last year. That Strange World movie that's coming out Thanksgiving, that actually looks pretty good. So the Disney original team, I'm still willing to give credit, but the Pixar team, they just seem to have pounded into the dirt, which just really sucks, because Pixar was like the groundbreaking animation company for so long. So yeah, it's really sad to see.
It is, but I think like we have broke new ground in the likes of Apple TV Plus. HBO finding themselves as a streaming service as well as a cable provider has been absolutely brilliant. And I think hey, like, even if Disney Plus isn't something you're into, you at least know that quality that they've established will always be there. Whatever that means to you, if you're a super Marvel fan, you're gonna love everything about it. You're gonna love that huge, massive drop that happened last week. That's great, because a lot of that is Disney Plus as well as theaters. So streaming is in an interesting place where I feel like we have always said the streaming wars are alive and well, but I really feel like we're still so early. I don't know if
we are. We're not even a full 2 years in yet. That's the crazy part.
It's still, yeah, exactly. It's still so early, and I think now you have sort of Peacock. The whispers are coming around. Will they do this Office reboot? Will they not? Even if they don't, it's driving people to use their service. Like, because of all this Office chatter happening again, I actually now have been going to Peacock, which I get in my cable package, and watching an episode or two of The Office before bed at night. So now I'm actually using Peacock now.
I
Um,
watched The Bad Guys on there because I was using my friend's subscription because he was watching Yellowstone on there, which is another big one that apparently a lot of people are talking about. There was a brief rumor that Yellowstone was finally going to start getting nominated for Emmys, and it didn't. And I watched The Bad Guys, which is the most recent DreamWorks animation on there. And I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. That was actually a pretty damn good animated movie, you know?
yeah, I mean, dude, so there's nice little pockets that will allow for creativity to sort of go head to head, and may the best man win, but hopefully the audience wins because everyone's pushing themselves, like a golden age of those golden ages of Hollywood that used to exist. Hopefully maybe streaming can bring back another one, because I think we need it. I think it's
Right.
been really good though lately. I think there's been a lot of quality content. These guys up here providing a lot of it. But
100%.
I mean, I feel like, are we at the point now where we want to sort of talk about the future and what to expect? Like, where do you want to take this thing, Dom, in
Well,
the
real
last
quick, I
few?
wanted to talk about For All Mankind and Physical real quick before we get into we can talk about kind of the future afterwards, because I also wanted to talk about maybe like some shows that are coming up that you might be looking forward to, like some things that you've watched just in general. Like I said, let's just make this like the fun section where we actually talk about some of the stuff that we have been watching. So For All Mankind and Physical, like I said, two shows that we started watching during the pandemic, two shows that I didn't really know what to expect going in. I was really amazed by the Physical trailer, and I feel like the biggest kind of the biggest reason why I feel like we gravitated towards Physical is because we felt like Physical came in at the perfect time where our beloved Glow on Netflix had just been canceled, and we were looking for a show to fulfill that spot that was missing in both of our hearts. And Physical came in and was just like, "Oh, you thought you were missing this? Here you go." And we watched that first season and we're floored by it. We're like, "Yes, this is everything we wanted." And it's crazy to me where we were talking all about all this great TV for weeks. We talked about Ozark, despite where that went. We talked about Barry, Better Call Saul, what's it called? Succession, back and forth. We've been talking about all these great shows, and I wasn't sure, how it goes with sophomore efforts of shows. That's usually the make or break for shows as far as their continuing success. And I've been watching this past season of Physical, and I'm like, this is the best show ever. I'm like, this is the best show on TV right now. Apropos of that, you get a show like For All Mankind, which is a show, again, that just felt so revolutionary and so forward thinking, but also so traditionalist, right? It feels like such a traditional TV show because the guy's making it, Ronald D. Moore, the showrunner of the 04 Battlestar Galactica show. And you have a show that it was really weird because I was watching For All Mankind at the same time that I was like getting really heavily into The Expanse. I've been watching The Expanse heavily recently. I already finished the third season of that. Great show. And I feel like I'm almost watching like a prequel for The Expanse, where at this point, like, they're finally just starting to settle on Mars. And then meanwhile, on The Expanse, I'm watching like the Mars-Earth conflict begin. And I'm like, what is happening? I'm in like this weird simulation right now where you have these two different shows made by completely separate creators that are just seem to be tackling like a lot of the same thing. And it's really strange. But yeah, For All Mankind is great. It talk about just delivering on a premise that felt like kind of a gimmick for one of, oh, what if Russia beat us to the moon? And they just took that whole thing and just ran with it. And now we're 3 seasons deep. We talked about how much we love that season 2 finale, just how much it like really just blew our socks off. And now we're in this third season, which I'll say has not been my favorite of the 3, but it's still doing things that are better than so many different shows on the air. So I don't know. What's your take on that? What have you been what have your thoughts been so far on Physical season 2 and For All Mankind season 3?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo your sentiments here pretty much verbatim, just in my own way, because I couldn't agree more. I think while it is not my favorite season so far, it still has that quality, that bar of filmmaking, that drama that I think we were both dying to have again in our lives, to sink our teeth into when we first found this show that filled that void better than any show that I've seen in a long time. Is still For All Mankind. And Physical, I think exploring her character, forgive me, her name is escaping
Sheila.
me at
Sheila.
Sheila. Yeah, her, just exploring her character further. I think it's amazing the way they're handling the disorders that she suffers. And I think it's just such an that show is so brilliant. It's like the most interesting character study. It really accents like the way people interact with one another. What is love? What is listening to someone else? Like, it's just the way that they handle the interpersonal relationships of our mundane day-to-day lives is really interesting in that show, because the setting is just so unique and so weird. And then of course we have the silliness with the surfer and his
His
girlfriend
girlfriend.
who
Lou Taylor Pucci continuing to steal every single scene that he's in. I'm like, this is a one-off. I mean, we loved him for the first scene. We're like, this is a one-off character though, and they've still managed to make it like that whole subplot, which has kind of been like relegated to the side. But I'm like, I'm like, I love this show. It's so good. Every character is great.
But what a gripping C story, B story, whatever you wanna
Oh
call it. I
yeah.
mean, it's those few minutes we get are absolutely brilliant. I mean, just that one scene alone where the ex-boyfriend comes into the house, and even though she's willing to leave him and get back with a man who's terrible, he understands that it's out of desperation and that she does still love him, so he accepts her. Like, they've even added depth to a character like him in those moments
Yeah.
where his forgiveness and his understanding, his sympathy for her and his love for her, wow, okay, this might be a stupid surfer stoner on the outside, but he's still a person with complexity and depth. And I think that's what all these Apple shows offer is complexity and depth. The only thing that worries me about these Apple shows, and I know it's not them getting canceled, right? They don't have the Netflix problem. It just kind of makes me sad. Like, I feel like we're the only ones talking about For All Mankind.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone talking about
Yeah.
Physical. What do you think, man? You're definitely have always been more entrenched in these circles. Like, let's hear it.
Yeah, it's depressing to say the least because even amongst like my film friend fan, and I will say I feel like it might be a result of timing. Not, it definitely has nothing to do with the quality of the shows because as we know, and as everybody who's watched the shows know, the quality's got nothing to do with it. I think it's just a matter of timing and service provider. It's the fact that Apple is still so new to the game. It's still building up its brand. People still really only think of Ted Lasso when they think of it. Like Apple, like Ted Lasso is pretty much Apple's entire brand identity right now, you know? And it's a fact that a lot of these again, their shows, they're only in their second season. Like, this is not the first time we've seen it. Like, as big of a show as we think of Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad and all these other shows that were like, seemed like these huge hits when they were first on, like, think about where those shows were at in their second seasons, you know? Just in general, I feel like, again, you talk about all these shows. It's like it's not until like you really hit like the third season that they really start to hit up. Like, I know for a fact, Sopranos really didn't even get a lot of like the recognition that it deserved until probably around season 3 and 4 was when it really picked up. Same thing with Game of Thrones. Same thing with Breaking Bad. You know, Lost, I feel like, is the only one of those shows that was like really they were talking about it like every week, and that was really just because of the cable TV of it all. You know, so I'll say that while it does definitely make me sad that not everybody is talking about it, like in the sense of them being breakout hits the way that Ted Lasso was, if we're just using another example on the streaming service. My whole thing is I'm like, look, in this age where it is just so hard to ask for anything quality, yeah, the zeitgeist, the water cooler talk, and being able to talk with other people about it is half the fun. But for my money and my experience, I just like having just a great show to watch. Just a great show to watch that I know is just going to be consistent quality that I could wait for week to week each week, you know? And I'm okay with that, honestly. You know, that probably makes me like a rare exception in like this massive sea of TV viewers, but I'm more than okay with that, especially since I see that so much of the time the water cooler talk is what ends up destroying some of those shows, you know?
Yeah, totally. I think I couldn't agree more again. um, I think once you get past the 17 two-factor authentication checks that Apple requires you to log in, and then once you can finally get that video to play on their streaming service,
Yeah, a
you and
lot of
I
these
know I've
streaming services, they no, you're good, but it's like, yeah, a lot of these streaming services, there's a reason again why Netflix is still running it because you know at the very least when you watch something Netflix, you're not gonna have all these bugs and breakdowns and delays and such.
yeah, and it's surprising for Apple. And not to sound too much like Professor Pat here, you know, Mr. Critique of all things technology, but once you can get past all that, you are in for some highbrow um golden age style television, neo renaissance of what made the late 90s early 2000s so great with like Sopranos, Lost, Breaking Bad, you name it. We're it's back, it's on Apple TV Plus, and that's a fact. But hey, it might take you a half hour to finally click that video, so just
Exactly.
know what you're in for. It's part of the
It
fun
might.
though, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So yeah. So before we wrap it up and before we get out of here, Chris, you wanted to talk about kind of the future of where we wanted to go, but I want to talk about like just man, we haven't been on this podcast in so long. We haven't been able to have like a regular casual discussion in so long. What are some of the stuff that you've been watching recently? You know, not just obviously comfort food stuff, but like just some of the new stuff that you've been watching recently. Because I know you've been watching new stuff. I've been watching some new stuff. So I wanted to hear what you've been watching first, like movies, TV, everything. This includes everything.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have only a few episodes left of one of your favorite shows, Dom, Succession,
Oh
and
yeah, you're almost caught up. Let's
I'm
go. What
loving
do you
it, and I
think?
cannot wait to join. I believe it was Dustin
Yeah.
and you next season to review this. I mean, Jeremy Strong. I can't
Holy
say enough
shit,
good things
right?
about him. He is.
Right?
I have a few episodes left, so you know, I'll
Are you on
text you
season 3 or are you
obviously.
still on season 2?
Season 3, so I have a few episodes
All
left.
right.
Where
All
I
right.
think we have like 3 or 4 left.
So it was
Um,
wait, did you get to the Kendall birthday party episode yet or not yet?
Not yet. So
Okay. All right. All
I
right.
suppose I now have to text you after I watch
Oh,
that
yeah,
one.
the last 3 episodes, the
Um,
Kendall birthday party and then the last 2 episodes which are in Italy are like those were like you're going to see now why that was my number 1 of last year TV wise.
Okay, phenomenal. Another show that will be in my top 10 yet again is hey, we're going back to Netflix here. Afterlife just concluded, and I
Yes,
finally
Afterlife
found the
season
time
3.
to finish it, and it is just so absolutely brilliant, charming, sad, sadistic because of how he plays on your emotions with the topics that Gervais chooses to touch upon. And what more can I say? I mean, it's if you want dark, cynical English Brit humor at its finest, and also just a man who is willing to joke about anything, but somehow finds a way to make it seem like it's all okay. That's Ricky Gervais in a nutshell. And then the last thing that I've just been loving, which I haven't really had a chance to voice here, is just The Boys. It's quality content. It's just it's
So
consistent.
good.
It's fun. It's lovable.
This
And give me
past
another
season for
season already.
me, this past season for me, best season yet. Because if you remember when we were talking about it back in the fall of 2020, and season 2 came and went, and you're like, "Where's this gonna go now?" They kind of ended it, for lack of a better word. And this past season just showed, oh, they weren't done, dude. I didn't get a chance to talk about this with you as much, but the minute the first episode when the termite, the mini dude, goes inside the other dude's and blows him up, I'm like, this show is back. This show is back. I'm like,
Yeah.
we're right back in it. And then, dude, where this season, oh, the twists and turns where this season went, it was, but best season yet. We already talked about it a decent amount. Go watch our The Boys podcast episode. It was great. I didn't think they were going to get much better than Stormfront. And needless to say, again, I did not watch a single episode of Supernatural, but god damn, Jensen Ackles as Soldier Boy this past season. Holy shit.
Seriously.
It's
But
nuts. But
what about
yeah.
you, man? I know you always have a big list of stuff.
Yeah. So not too much like new stuff recently. Like I said, I've been watching Physical and For All Mankind. That's pretty. Like I said, I've been watching obviously the final season of Better Call Saul. I'm waiting until our episode in a couple of weeks where we're going to cover the finale of that. But I will say that the second half of this season, since it premiered, has definitely taken a lot of interesting twists and turns that I would not have expected. Which is again nothing less than I would have expected. I say again, I still can't believe they took a prequel to Breaking Bad that started off as a joke in the writer's room and have turned it into one of the best shows on the air right now, one of the best prequels ever made. And again, a show that a lot of people are consistently saying is better than Breaking Bad. I'm one of the few people that doesn't think that, but hey, that's just me. A couple of shows that are coming out soon that I'm really looking forward to. My beloved Industry from fall of 2020 is finally coming back for that second season that premieres actually tomorrow night. Reservation Dogs second season coming back. I just recently have been watching the new season of What We Do in the Shadows. They're only 4 episodes in, but that show is just as hilarious as it always is. There are a couple bits in the first episode where I'm just like, okay, this show is back. Like we're just everything that Naja and Laszlo get into it's just absolutely ridiculous. Nandor with his freaking bringing back all of his wives, and then just having this genie just kill them off one by one. It's so good.
I'm
It's so freaking funny.
I'm waiting to refresh myself around when our podcast episode on that comes up. So I'm just letting them stockpile, and then it's just going to be a nice little week straight
Oh,
binge there. But I'm glad to hear it's going well so far.
it's still so good.
Yeah.
It's still so good. But yeah, so there's those who I've recently been like, as far as like, again, there's always like at least 1 or 2 old shows that I try to watch. I've recently finished season 5 of Mad Men. I'm probably going to finish that show later on down the line. That one might be the best season of that show yet. Let's go. I took a break from The Leftovers a little bit. It's still unbelievable what that show was able to accomplish. But the thing about The Leftovers is that it's basically if Lindelof with Lost only got to make like the emotional bits from the flashbacks and like none of the stuff from the island, basically. And it's great, but it is so heavy and it is so weighty that I'm like, after each episode, I'm like, I feel like I need to take a 19.5 hour long bath just to wash myself because this show is so friggin' dense. So I had to take a break with that. But man, I've recently been getting into The Expanse, and I don't think I've seen a show that is as bingeable as this show, like ever. Like I just plowed through the rest of season 1, and then I'm like, okay, they can't get that much better than this. And then I plowed through season 2, and I'm like, okay, they can't get much better than this. And now I just finished season 3, and I'm like, well, fuck, where are they gonna go next? Where they just went from like basically like a small little like sci-fi like Battlestar Galactica-esque like space exploration show to having all these crazy things about like crazy scientific experiments and sabotage in order to start intergalactic wars and like, you know, crazy like political like morally gray back and forth areas to this past season they were just like recently found out that the proto-molecule like opened a thing to another dimension, and now they have like an infinite number of wormholes and worlds they can travel to and explore. It's baffling how crazy this show got. And I'm like, wow, the first 3 seasons they pulled up on a sci-fi budget. I just finished the section where they canceled it right on sci-fi. So now I got the last 3 Amazon seasons to go through. So I'm really interested in to see where that's going to go. But I just recently started watching Amazon's latest drop, which I don't know if you saw, Chris, but Amazon dropped their adaptation of Paper Girls yesterday. And I watched the first 2 episodes. And again, I have no basis of the comic book. I didn't read the Brian K. Vaughan comic book that this was based off of. And what I will say is that I don't think I've ever seen a show that is both so emblematic of like all the things that I kind of hate about TV shows, but at the same time, like so engrossing and entertaining of where it's like, I'm aware of all the flaws that are abundant in each episode. Like certain of the characters are not that great. Certain of the again, messaging is kind of really overt and obvious, but I'm still compelled to watch with what's going on. They're still bringing up, I think, like legitimately interesting story points. And like I'm 2 episodes in and I kind of do want to finish it and see where it goes. It's really strange. I've never had this conundrum happen to me before. I'd be really interested to see your thoughts just to see if you can make it past the first episode, for nothing
Damn,
else.
okay.
I can safely say I enjoyed it a lot better than that piss poor attempt at Y the Last Man last year. But the difference being also is that Y the Last Man was in production hell for years on end. And at that point, they're like, okay, we just have to get this out, But it's Amazon, so it's got an actual budget. It's actually got interesting filmmaking. I think they actually build the story from what I've seen in an interesting way. Again, I did not read the comic book series that this is based off, so I don't know where this is going to go. But yeah, I'd be interested to see your thoughts on it.
Because my 3 favorite comics of all time are all written by Brian K. Vaughan. You have Saga, Y the Last Man, and Paper Girls. All comics that I'm not up to date anymore, but I was following along for a minute, and you saved me ruining the legacy of Y the Last Man by just saying,
yes,
please don't watch this.
I watched the first 3 episodes. I'm like, I can't do anymore. I'm like, this is too. I'm like, just stop. I'm like, just don't. Then yeah, fall 2021 until Succession and Arcane came out was pretty rough. So I'm hoping we don't get. I'm trying to do the best that we can in order to stave off a repeat of that.
But you're thinking I should at least give Paper Girls a
try. I'd say the first 2 episodes. Just to say, again, the references, okay. It's
Did they do a double drop? It's the first 2 that dropped?
No. They dropped the whole 8. They dropped the whole 8.
Okay.
So it's all available.
Then I'll watch the first 2 and I'll report back to you.
Yeah, just so I can get your thoughts. Because again, I'm gonna watch it and finish it just because I'm like, okay, I'm entertained by this. Whether it's for the right reasons or not, I'm not sure. But I'm at the very least entertained by this. So like, I'll be willing to at least finish it up. Again, there are a couple of other shows that I still want to finish up. I started watching The After Party on Apple TV Plus. That's fine. It's like a typical like funny like, oh, it's Lord and Miller. It's all the familiar actors that you know. It's the dude from Parks and Rec, Ike Barinholtz. What's her name? Alana Glazer. Sam Richardson, all the usual suspects. It's that type of comedy. It's outdated comedy, but I know there's a lot of people that enjoy that stuff. The kind of the kitsch of it is that, oh, it's a murder mystery where they're trying to investigate Dave Franco's death, but every other episode is from a different character's perspective, and because it's from a different character's perspective, they shoot it like a different style of a movie. Like the first episode is a rom-com, the second movie is like an action thriller, and like they change it up. And like I said, it's good, but like I said, it's not great. I don't like it. I don't love it. There's also that show, The Bear, that everyone was going nuts about on social media, the Hulu show with the dude from Shameless, Jeremy Allen White. I watched the first 4 episodes. It's really good, but there are just certain things where I'm just like, story-wise, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I just can't get into it as much as everybody else does. But it's good. It's really, really good. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I've been watching. As far as movies go, there's a couple of movies that I watched recently. But, yeah, movies, it's still, for the most part, just, like, dead in the dirt. So I watched The Gray Man on Netflix. That was pretty good. I had fun with that. I watched Jordan Peele's Nope. It's his weakest of his 3, but it's Jordan Peele, so it's still interesting and worth watching. So that's kind of what I can say about that. But yeah, that's really it for stuff that I've been watching recently. Again, I always try to stay up to date as far as what everyone's got going on,
Totally, man. No, it's I'm gonna check out The Bear for sure, and I'll watch those first 2 episodes of Paper Girl.
Yeah, like I said, I gotta get your thoughts on that. Just for nothing else, like I said, I'm like, you could love it, you could hate it. I don't care. I'm like, I need to get your thoughts on that, because it's one of those things where I'm like, it's too interesting to just let it be,
Yeah, I see a weekend in our calendar coming up without any topics. Maybe we do another one of these. We sort of touch base and
absolutely,
refresh on. You gave me some homework. Maybe you watch an episode or 2 of C, and maybe we report back and see where we're at with everything.
Maybe we do. Yeah, like I said, I'm on another break from The Expanse, so I'll see if when I still have to watch the last season of Game of Thrones though for our Talking Thrones recap series, which I still can't believe we're almost done with that. We just premiered the first episode of season 7 this past on Friday, so yeah, we're coming up on the end of that too. Like we're gonna talk about House of the Dragon when that drops. I am interested to see how that goes because Game of Thrones.
Yes. Well, we got to have Professor Pat on for that.
Oh, 100%. Well, because Game of Thrones is so weird because I thought that was a franchise and I'm like, okay, that was like kind of one and done once it was finished, and they're like, nah, we're trying to franchise this shit, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, George R. R. Martin has 3 really strong things going on right now. The books, which he will never finish, because the blog and the TV franchise world has taken over his life. So,
You have to keep pouring lemon juice on that wound that already has salt in it. Like, come on, man. You know how I feel about this.
Dude, I just can't get over how many pages he writes for that blog, yet he just can't sit down and.
Supposedly, he's still writing pages for the Winds of Winter. Supposedly, and he's still gonna finish A Dream of Spring, which I'm like, I don't even know how to feel at this point.
How old is he?
I don't even know, man. It's like
I just worry.
Like mid-70s, man. Mid-70s. And you know what the worst part is? He's specifically gone out of his way to say, is like, yeah, I'm not going to pull a wheel of time. I'm not letting anybody else finish this story. It's like, so if he dies, we're essentially going to get like no resolution in these books at all.
Hey.
Ugh.
He's 73. I wish him all the best. Anyways, man, this was a fun time.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this episode.
This.
It was nice.
It's a good episode. I had a lot of fun with this. Again, we need to do more of these episodes just in general because we had so many of these back during the pandemic, and I feel like we don't have as many anymore because of how content focused we are. But we have a lot of gaps now because, again, they don't release content every week, and we're in a little bit of like a content lull right now. So I have a feeling we're going to be a lot more have a lot more of these. But make sure you guys tune in for us next week as we wrap up kind of the summer movie season with Bullet Train. I'm going to be really interested to see kind of what the reception of that is going to be. I feel like that's going to be a movie that we're going to love, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of what the public's reaction is and how many people will want to watch that in theaters versus waiting for it on a streaming service. Chris, thanks so much for coming back to host. I hope we get you a lot more for the rest of the year before again, we wrap up this year. Just in general, we got a lot of big changes both in our personal lives coming on the horizon, but where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Yeah, you guys can find me here next week for Bullet Train, as well as anywhere that matters at Christian Evanko. Evanko spelled Evanko. So that little Instagram logo right down there where the Talking TV podcast is, I'm on there as well. Also on Twitter, as well as Talking TV. Also on YouTube, Facebook, the whole 9. So again, it's at Christian Evanko. And hey, if you want to hear a song or two to maybe, sip some lemonade out in the sun with, or go on that summer hike, follow me on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Google, YouTube at Christian Evanko, Evanko. And Dom, where can they find you?
At Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, where I have been slightly posting again. I've been posting just some funny memes just in general on my page. You know me, it's all jokes, it's all laughs. I just want people to have a good time when they come to my page. But be sure to follow the official Talking TV podcast across all platforms. I just put out all of our Comic-Con kind of coverage on our TikTok page recently, and I'm still going at it with the top 10 lists on TikTok. I've been having a lot of fun on there. Just recently, I tried to surprise everyone by putting Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda for my top 10 supervillain castings, and it seems to have been going pretty well overall. So we'll see how that goes. Be sure to follow us at Official Talking TV Podcast across all platforms. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube if you're watching us here this morning. Be sure to follow us on Twitch if you're watching us here this morning on that. New episodes are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every single Monday. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.